And we're back, Stripe Show Podcast on a Thursday. I'm your host, Travis Fulton. Thank you for making us part of your day. We appreciate you being here. We are on a great run here, Stripe Show Podcast. It's been a terrific week. I feel good about my picks this week. I think Gary Woodland is due for a win. I like where that iron game is going. I just saw this morning that Abraham Ancer has withdrew. So Woodland, Connors, my boy Mito Pereira is going to have a week here soon as well. So it'll be fun to watch that. Valero Texas Open. And then, of course, next week is the Masters as the golf season really starts to kick off. This is a Thursday. On Thursday, we focus on instruction. It's just me today. We're going to have some fun. I appreciate you being here. Some of you are watching me right now as I will be demonstrating a number of things. You can watch my podcast on my YouTube channel. You can also go to Instagram at Travis Fulton Golf. I'll be posting a lot more video-based stuff from the podcast on those platforms, as well as my website. Go check it out. Brand new website, travisfultongolf.com. Go look at the training programs. The training programs are killing it right now. People are loving them. They're brand new. Some of you purchased my training programs last year or the year before. I have fully updated those. They are now living on my website. There is 4 currently up. The 5th, 150 yards on in, will be posted here within, I would say, the next 10 days. Really excited about that one. These training programs, the foundation of the training programs, the major principles of the training programs are going to kind of lay the foundation today of this podcast. As I go through, I would say the most common questions and the most common mistakes that I've seen in particular parts of the game, the driver, irons, and short game. More putting content coming your way soon. Look for that. New training program will be out probably the 1st of May on putting. Super stoked about that. But anyway, back to the big stick, the driver, the irons, the short game. That's what we're going to be talking about today. I've seen a lot of the most common reoccurring patterns, and I want to really focus on those today, because when I get online lessons and people send me video, when I do in-person lessons, there are common mistakes that people fall into. And I want to talk about those, and I want to show you the fixes and why they're important. Now, if you're watching me, you will see me demonstrate this stuff. If you're listening, I will articulate it, I promise, very clearly, so the picture is painted in your mind, and you will learn today. Now, if you want to really train and you want to really get after it, and you want to, let me take a step back. And I have to say, I'm overstating this a bit. If you want to educate yourself just a little bit more and move the needle the right way just a little bit more to enjoy the game just a little bit more, learn how to hit that driver a little bit more solid, maybe a little longer, a little more accurate. Learn how to draw it, maybe learn how to fade it, or just learn some finesse around the greens, have 2, 3, 4 different shots that you can go to this season, then the training programs are for you. Online lesson on top of that, off we go. Let's get after it. The driver, my total driving program, it starts right from the very beginning with the setup. I think the driver is one of the most complicated clubs to set up to, and the reason is because the ball position, it's not in the middle of the stance, it's forward. Now, I have had a lot of success with people doing this drill with the driver. Okay, of course, that ball is going to be teed up. I'm going to be just facing you here for right now for the sake of the podcast. Feet together, I get my grip. I take my front foot, I just flare it a little bit, and I take a big step with my trail foot. Okay, now of course that's going to get the ball off the left heel, left shoulder area. And now it's forward in my stance. So it's a really simple drill. Feet together, little flare, big step. And then from here, I want to make sure my hands are in line, not forward, in line. I want to also make sure I have a little side bend. And I also want to make sure my chest is looking more back here. Okay, now I just said a lot there, and those things seem simple, but are difficult. And the reason is because the ball is forward, and when the ball is forward, we tend to turn and face it. And when we turn and face it, Now the shoulders, if I get set up here just to this tee, okay, now the shoulders are open. And I'm not a big fan of seeing this kind of setup where we're open and also where the head starts to get closer to being over the ball. We got to get behind the ball. Okay, that's really important with the big stick. This is a big head, doesn't have a lot of loft. We know we want to probably hit it level or slightly on the way up, so we've got to get behind it, and this drill really helps do that. Okay, hands in line, little tilt, turn your chest a little back here, and even maybe just a little more weight on the right foot, and then off we go. Seems simple, but if you do that, I promise you, you're ahead of the game, and is very much the beginning of the total driving program. And it's amazing to me how much good feedback I get just off that video and the impact that that made with their driver. I hear a lot of this. I can draw my irons, but I can't draw my driver. I fade my driver a little bit. Why is that? And the reason has a lot to do with what I just showed you there, that address. Okay, we're just kind of gravitating up to that forward ball position. And when we do that, it starts to move the path a little bit more to the left. The reality is, with the driver, if you do hit up on it a little bit, that upward attack angle, believe it or not, is not helping you draw it so much. Okay, that upward attack angle is actually moving the path a little bit more to the left. So the reality is if you do hit up on it slightly, then you do probably need to feel like you're a little bit more to the right with the body, and that swing direction, as we call it, is swinging just a little bit more from the inside, and that'll help you draw it. And that really starts with what I established at address there with the driver. So some things to think about, okay, as we go to the irons now, and you think, well, with an iron you hit down on it, and that attack angle, when we hit down, say with the 7-iron, that attack angle and hitting down is actually moving the path to the right. So I don't want to get too far into the woods, but hopefully what I just articulated there kind of helps and hits and registers as far as those that are, yeah, gosh, I don't draw my driver like I do my irons. And you think about your 7-iron, ball position here with a 7-iron is going to be a little forward of center, maybe about a ball. And it's a little bit easier with the ball there when I side bend to the right to feel like I'm square to it. The ball's more in front of me versus, way up there like this. If I exaggerate it, I would tend to gravitate up to it. So that forward ball position is an obstacle for so many. I think, from what I've seen in many, many years of doing this, whether in an online lesson or an in-person lesson, I'm seeing that all the time. Now, let's continue to go off of the draw. My #1 training program is Operation Baby Draw. I posted that 2 years ago, and I got a lot of questions. Why did you start with Operation Baby Draw? And the reason is because I feel like the majority of golfers that are out there, amateur golfers, even getting into the game, the novice player, need to learn how to draw it. Okay, and you think about what goes into a draw. A draw, we know that the path needs to be kind of traveling a little from the inside. What helps that is an attack angle that's kind of moving down a little bit, but also a swing direction that's kind of working maybe a little bit from the inside like this. Okay, a little bit in to out. Really never makes it out there. It turns the corner back around, but you get the idea. I'm attacking it from the inside. Now, that seems simple, right? We sit up here, it's like, oh, okay, I'm just going to kind of feel like I'm going to bring it in here, all right, and I'm just going to let the club head kind of hit down a little bit, and that path going out to the right, the face would close to that path a little bit, and I would hit a draw. And on the surface, it seems simple, but the reality is that probably 75% of players don't do that. They're the other way. Their path is working kind of too much to the left. And why is that? Well, everything that we kind of get into in golf tends to lead us down this path of I feel the need to kind of get steeper on it and maybe swing kind of across this way to the left. Now, the most common culprit of that is an open face. The club face gets open in the swing, whether it's getting the face kind of rotated this way. So if I take it halfway back, you can see the toe is rotating up to the sky or maybe pointing behind me. Sometimes when you see that face rotating open, you see it kind of dip inside like this. Inside meaning the club head gets behind the hands early, shafts parallel to the ground, but the club face is in behind the hands. You see a lot of extension in the wrist. That lead wrist gets extended. A lot of cup in the lead wrist. If I put my left hand out in front of me and I go like this, cupping, a lot of dish there. And then if I go the other way, that's flexion, right? It feels like I'm bowing it out, it's rounding out. I see a lot more extension in the wrist, so the face kind of opens, and then a lot of extension, whether it's up here or whether it's coming down. Right? I see a lot of players kind of pulling down, and when you pull down like this, of course you're going to pull down, and that lead wrist is going to be extended, and the shaft is going to get in line with that. It's going to want to try to get in line with that pulling down force, and you can see how it gets vertical. So none of that is really any good when it comes to controlling the face, generally speaking. And when that face gets open, right, and we hit a shot and the ball goes to the right, so let's go ahead and put a ball here. Hope you're enjoying the studio, by the way. I am. We're getting moved in. We're probably 40% on the way in, but we've got all kinds of great content coming your way from this studio. So I roll the face open. I've got a cup wrist, and look at the ball goes to the right. And you're like, well, I can't play golf hitting it way over there. So what we start to do is we start to, well, if it's going to go over there, then we start aiming more left, and or we start swinging more left, which means, you know, we start kind of diving across it this way, right, to try to get the ball to start more to the left. And it's like, okay, yeah, so it's still slicing, but it started more over there. I can play more of that. So we kind of figure it out based around the club face. So in Operation Baby Draw, you see me spend a lot of time, and I mean a lot of time, on getting the club face more prepared. And a good rule of thumb is get the face prepared as early as you can. Okay, as early as you can. So a lot of that for people, it starts with the grip. Talk a lot about the grip, the influence to the face. It really starts to talk a lot about, you know, getting the face more square here, toe more down, getting the lead wrist into flexion, flatter earlier, whether it's up here at the top, okay, and or in transition coming down. And now all of a sudden this face starts to close. It starts to be more closed, I should say. And as it starts to be more closed for that player, what do? Well, they're still aiming left and or swinging left, and then that face is now more shut, and look at it. It's like, dang, that felt great. Woo, that felt good, but I pulled it. Okay, so something has to change. I hit it a lot longer. It felt fabulous because the face was square, but I pulled it. So then what starts to happen? Well, you get tired of pulling it, so you start to square up more, maybe even aim slightly right, and then you start taking that path now more out to the right, right? So now I was swinging more out to the right, and you can see that ball started more right, and now it's trying to draw back to the left, and then I just start working that equation, and as they work that equation of the face more shut and the path working more to the right, things start to fall into place, and all of a sudden they can start doing things in their swing with their body that creates more speed and is more conducive through the bag. Because when you get to the driver, all of those things that we just went through, the better preparation of the face, the wrist angle, this path now starting to work from the inside, and out to the right. All of those things, countered with some improvement in the body, which we'll get to here in a second, starts to really be more conducive with the longer clubs. Because when you get to these, 4 irons and 3 woods and drivers, and you're aiming over here and the face is open and you're coming across it, all of those misses just get magnified. And you're leaving so much distance on the table. So Operation Baby Draw really speaks to the majority of people and what they need to go through, starting at address, educating themselves on what they need to do with the club face preparation and how that pertains to their wrist angles, and then how to get the club working on a good swing shape where I can attack it from the inside and start to improve upon some body movements that's going to allow me to hit it longer and straighter. And so there's a lot there to kind of digest, but I think at the end of the day, that is really the foundation of Operation Baby Draw. And I got to tell you, people love that program. They love it. If I had to recommend an order to the madness here, I would say Operation Baby Draw with Total Driving, off you go. Off you go into playing better golf. Here's the other thing that happens with Operation Baby Draw, and the reason why I teach it the way that I do. And it has to pertain to the swing shape and how the club moves in space relative to your body and then relative, let's say, to your target line. One of the most common errors that I see is this swing shape right here, where the club head gets inside, in behind the hands. Sometimes you see the face rotate open, sometimes you see the face shut, but the club head gets in, and then it has to go up, and then it has to go this way, kind of out over the top to get back to the ball. Okay? Now, in, up, and this way, when I see that swing shape with the club, is usually always countered with the body some sort of fault, whether it's you see the body start to kind of sway a little bit, right, where it kicks out that way, the lower body, then you can see the spine leaning too far to the left. That's no good. Don't do that. Sometimes you see the body not turning very much at all. You see them just very restricted, right? Like the legs are tight, the shoulders aren't turning much, the spine's not dynamic at all, and there's just a lack of turn, right, in general. So what happens is when I fix this, and I fix this particular swing shape every single week. Every single week. Online lesson, in-person lesson, just casual conversation. Every single week, I am getting people to get the club head a little bit more out in front of them initially. Okay? Out here, club head's got to work out and up. See this? It's kind of this way, not this way. It doesn't mean your hands go out, though. It's not that. I don't want your hand pushing your hands out and your left arm disconnecting off your chest. Your hand's kind of staying close to you, but the club head's a little out in front of you, and then it can go around you. It's amazing just that education of there and then around, and then how that can lead to the club shallowing out back from the inside. And you know I spend adequate time about how that shallowing out works, right? And shallowing out, just in simple terms, when you hear that term, it's the shaft in transition going closer to horizontal, moving towards horizontal, okay? Not towards vertical, okay? That's steepening in transition. This is shallowing in transition. I would prefer that you learn how to shallow in transition. Does that mean that you can't hit it good by having the shaft steepen a little bit? Of course you can. There's always outliers. Ricky Fowler has played his whole career that way, in getting the shaft to steepen some in transition. For whatever reason, a few years ago, he decided that he was going to try to now work the club the other way, so that's a major, major change. Okay, so shallowing out, do you have to do it? You don't have to do anything, right? You don't have to do anything. I mean, there's outliers that I watch every single day on that TV and in person with players that do this for a living, that, like you wouldn't teach it. Like you wouldn't teach it to a player. You would coach around it and do the things that you need to do with that particular player because that's the DNA of their swing and they're a genius at it. But as far as taking the 20 handicap, the 12 handicap, and telling them, hey, look, let's just go ahead and leave the face wide open and let's just go ahead and leave the shaft, steepening in transition and work around it. That's a headbanger. I would go broke teaching that pattern to people. So it's amazing when you get people to kind of go here and around and then back in here like this. It's an absolute game changer. So in Operation Baby Draw, you kind of learn all those things. You learn face control. You learn to get the swing shape better, right? You learn how to shallow it and hit it from the inside. Get the ball to start to the right and draw back. And as you do that, all of a sudden, you start to feel now how do I turn, right? Now my turn makes more sense. I'm turning my right hip better. I've got more weight shift on the downswing. I'm behind it more through impact. I'm rotating back around to the other side. Let's take that now and transition to Operation Drip Fade, which is the third program. And it's kind of cool because you've got total driving, which people love. I want to hit it longer. I want to hit it more accurate. Attack the driver. It's its own animal, own program. Then it's in the middle, I want to learn how to draw it more, which applies to so many. Some of you overdraw it. Some of you have that push-hook combination. And Operation Drip Fade is great for you because it kind of brings you back to closer to zero, right? And teaches you how to not hook it as much or even now hit that power fade. And as you go through this, one of the things that is apparent to me when I talk to golfers and I'm looking at them is this idea of spine extension, right? And spine extension is a term that I use so much in getting people to extend their spine more. Very seldom, if at all, do I tell someone to stay down, ever. The only time I would probably tell someone to stay down is if they were swinging their arms and not turning their body. All right, so it looked like that. I'm just swinging my arms and not turning. Then I would say, you know what, just keep your spine down and your head relatively still. But because we turn going back and we turn coming through, I would tell them not to stay down. In fact, I want you to extend your spine this way, back. Okay, and I want you to extend your spine back as you turn to the top. Now, I don't want you to pull up off the ball. I still want you to keep your orientation down to the ball, stay looking at it, but I want you to feel like your spine extends back as you turn. It's amazing what that does to a player. Amazing. And how it lengthens things out and it improves and increases club head speed dramatically. For those of you listening, for those of you watching, as you get older, as you lose range of motion, you feel like your swing's getting shorter, you feel like you're losing distance, you need to go through this. Okay? You need to go through how not only to turn your trail hip better in the backswing, but how to extend your spine. And how to elongate, open up, increase range of motion, and what that offers you in the way of speed, what that offers you in the way of doing what you want to do with the curve of the golf ball. Now, spine extension is also vital coming through. So I come down, and as I hit it, my spine extends again. Boom. Look at that. It doesn't stay down. Right? It doesn't stay down. Staying down is false. The reality is the spine extends, and when the spine extends, that's how you keep your orientation to the ball. That's how you kind of stay in that box with your head, right? It's interesting, I hear a lot, boy, his head didn't move. Kept his head still. On the surface, that would tell you, the golfer, to keep your head still. It restricts turn. Okay, by keeping the head still, it really restricts turn. By trying to stay down in flexion with your spine, it actually encourages your head to move off the ball and then back in front of it coming through. Okay, so it's a little bit of it's tricky. It's not what you perceive it to be or what you're hearing on TV or from someone to keep your head still. The reality is when you turn, you got to extend. That's how you keep your head in that same spot generally. And then coming down, and I turn through. I want to stay behind it. I've got to extend a little bit, okay, as I'm swinging through the impact zone. So spine extension is a huge deal. I mean, just a huge deal. As we move to Operation Drip Fade, it's fun now to work with that player who, has learned to swing it from the inside and perhaps is too far from the inside, hits too many push hooks, and then you can start bringing them, back around to the other side and kind of going this way to the left. And as you go through Operation Drip Fade, you have to evaluate their wrist angles and how they're using their wrist angles in the golf swing. It's easier if you see someone who just takes the club head a little too far in and then they swing a little too far from in. They just kind of return it there. It's like it kind of starts in here and they make a good turn and then it comes right back down that same line. It's just a little too much from the inside and they hit too many hooks. So you just kind of like, all right, let's keep the ball forward in the stance and let's just kind of get a little more out here. And then it wants to come back down more out there. Like that's an easy one. Where it gets more difficult is when you see a player who gets that kind of steep and from the inside, where they get the shaft a little vertical and they have a lot of extension in the lead wrist. And that's usually set up from a very strong grip. Where the left hand's over, right hand can be under, and then you see a lot of this extension, cupping of the lead wrist. The grip is so strong, the face is shut, and then they pull it down from the inside, and then what this is countered with is this high handle. Okay, where you see this really high handle at impact, right? And that high handle is going to kind of send the club head and get the face to look more out that way, and that high handle creates a lot of push hooks. Okay, so that one's more difficult. And I spend a lot of time with that player, and I've got a lot of good feedback in fixing this pattern through the program where you encourage them to go weaker in the grip, and then you start putting some flexion in that lead wrist. You start getting rid of that, and you start putting some flexion in it. Now the shaft can pitch back, and now they can rotate back around to the left. Okay, and this rotation kind of back around to the left is something that you see PGA Tour players do so often. You see them rehearse this where they're going like this. Right? Tiger does this a lot. And you're like, why is he doing that? Looks like he's coming over the top. And they're feeling that left exit. They're taking that swing direction left. And they want to take it left to neutralize that path and get that path closer to 0 or, -1, -2, the path slightly left. And then they can get the face slightly open to that and off they go to the right. But before you start swinging left, you've got to have some things in place. And that's where Operation Baby Draw and the purpose of that kind of comes in to teach you the things that need to be in place before you really start to learn how to turn the corner and swing back around to the left. One of them, when you start swinging left, is, again, I don't like to see the face open. Are there guys and women that have the face more open and they're super high-skilled players? Of course. But I like to get that face prepared, square, maybe slightly closed. Okay, I see a lot of faders of the ball, slightly closed. Club face kind of looking up towards the sky a bit. I like to see the shaft kind of pitching back in transition, even on a fade, yes. Okay, and I like to see a little bit of lead arm depth where the left arm is kind of working a little bit more around you. Okay. Now, are there guys that are up here, high left arms, that play at a high level? Of course. Right? Everyday golfer, amateur player, let's have a little depth. Right? Get the left arm kind of covering the shoulder, face prepared, shafts pitch back. All right, let's rotate left. Those are some of the things that you start to get prepared, and then you teach a player how to rotate left and what that means to the pivot, and how the pivot now needs to really get more rotational perhaps through the impact zone. That's a good place to be when you get to that point where maybe you start taking out, a little less of the lateral, a little less of this right bend, and you start getting them a little bit more on top of it and covering it. That's a buzzword, covering it. What does that mean? I get that question a lot. Covering it just basically means that you have less right bend through the impact zone. So it's less, of this. Okay, now some of you, a lot of you, as you watch this, you need to learn right bend because you're probably too far out in front. But if you have too much right bend, you can't rotate, so that can send the path, rotate as well, I should say, that can send the path too far out to the right. So it's not uncommon when they come to drip fade that you start teaching them how to feel like they're in more left bend and a little bit more on top of it so the club can exit back around to the corner. So there's some differences in there, right? There's kind of, in many ways, there can be the next layer of education in how you use the ground to be more rotational. That's kind of now made possible in many ways around some of the things that you've learned in face preparation, shallowing out the shaft, lead arm depth, your body's turning better. All of those things start to, move you along in a way that, okay, now I can kind of go this way. Oh, okay, now there's a little bit of a power fade there. And then if I want to go back to my draw, I just kind of go a little more that way. So it's a great, it's a great order and pattern to follow. Final thing, eventually you get to strokes gained, short game. And strokes gained, short game just gives you a foundation to follow. There's a lot of nuance, there's a lot of variables in short game. You can make so many videos around just so many little things that would influence trajectory, spin. What I focused on with strokes gained around the green is really giving you some of the common denominators and then the baseline shots that I think a player needs to learn. And the first one is just that bump and run where, all I'm trying to do is just hit a shot that has minimum air, maximum roll. And on the surface, that seems very simple, but for so many of you, you struggle with that, right? Especially when you start getting the leading edge caught in the ground. Then that builds into that little greenside pitch, which is my favorite one in learning how to hit a shot that's a little more medium trajectory and has more spin on it. And then that kind of graduates into more of a toss shot and then a lob shot and a bunker shot. And then pretty soon you've kind of got this arsenal where you're like, okay, yeah, I can hit 3, 4, 5 different types of shots. But I would recommend that you kind of have that stock shot being that little green side pitch, which I want to talk about here briefly in the green side pitch because I get a lot of questions on this one. It's the most important shot, that medium trajectory that kind of comes in, hits, and has a little spin on it. First thing is you got to clean your grooves, right? The number one thing that creates spin is friction. So you got to get this surface clean. That's number one. I'm bad at that. I can be lazy sometimes when I'm playing casually, but getting these cleaned off and that surface really, really clean is important because we want that interaction at impact to be in your favor. When you hit this green side pitch, first thing is I like to hit it with the 56. I like to have a little bit more bounce built in. That's just me, especially here in Bermuda, the sticky, in Florida, the sticky Bermuda. You can do it with the 60 if you want, 58. I go 56. I like to open it just slightly. I like to lean the shaft. Let me face the camera here. I like to lean the shaft, just a little forward. I like to get the shoulders pretty level. Okay. And then I like to feel like I've got just a little bit more extension in the lead wrist. Okay, so here's where I'm going to kind of take out some of the flexion. I like to feel like I just have a little more extension in the back of the wrist, and I can feel like there's a little bit of a dish on the top of the wrist as well. It's not a straight line like chipping, but there's a little more of an angle there. And that angle on the top of the wrist and the back of the wrist, I'm going to feel like kind of stays the same to here. But as I take it halfway back to here, I'm going to let the face rotate now more to toe up. So I feel like there's a little rotation there in the wrist forearm in getting that to there, see. I don't like to increase that angle significantly though. You can, right? You can increase the angle more, say in a bunker or in deeper rough and those types of things. Stock shot though, in the fairway, reasonable lie, you know, just look, a little bit, club head slightly above the wrist, toe more up, still feel the angle there in the wrist. I love that now, to let it fall, let the chest turn, return it the same way, and then put it back over here on the left hip. And again, it feels the same over here. So the top of the wrist and the back of the wrist, more of these angles here and how it goes from setup, rotates halfway back, and then back around to the other side and putting it off my left hip really starts to create this ability to hit this medium trajectory shot that has some spin on it. The club head can hit the ground and not dig, kind of bruise the ground a little bit. And it's like, wow, that's a shot for so many that you may not have at this point. And you may think to yourself, yeah, I don't have that shot. I have to hit a low one every single time, right? And if that's the case, this video, greenside pitch, is like, no question, one of the most commented on videos that I've put out there. And like, that shot has changed my game, because now when I miss the green, I feel like I can get the ball up and down. And you have to have that shot because of the collection areas, right? The greens, most greens are kind of pushed up. The ball's settling in these collection areas, whether it's in the rough or the tightly mown areas. So you have to have that, all right? So that's a big one. Don't, when you hit these shots around the green, you know, this is where we got to get out of the face being more here. In the full swing, we want the face more there. In short game, we want the face more there. Now, a lot of that is at address. A lot of that is just what I told you with the left wrist there and letting it have more angle there and rotate the left forearm to there. Okay, so getting that toe up starts to create some relief, use the bounce more, different type of interaction through the zone. And that's complicated, right? Changing that face angle, changing that wrist angle dynamic is a bit more complicated because it's a kind of a specialty pattern for short game. Like, I don't want that in the full swing. I want the face more shut. I want the left wrist to have more flexion. And then in the short game, face bit more open, left wrist has maybe a little more extension. Off we go. Secrets to the trade. Viktor Hovland's struggling with that. Viktor Hovland's learning how to do that. There's a lot of players that, you know, that can be challenging for. I think it's challenging for DJ in the way that his wrist angles work. So those are some of the things in strokes and short game, that being the most important shot. I want to finish with this, because I get this question a lot too, is that I talk about in a lot of my videos how spine angle changes a little bit in short game. With the driver, as we talked about at the beginning of this podcast, with the driver, I had the ball forward, way up off the left heel, and a significant amount of side bend to the right. Okay? So you look at the spine angle here with the driver, then we get in here with the short game shot, and now the shoulders are more level. The spine is a little more neutral. And even just maybe a touch more open. Okay, and we do that because now the sternum is more on top of the ball. All right, so as we get in closer and we start working these short game shots, we want to see some of that spine angle that we've established here with the driver and then the irons, and then into short game, it starts to get more level. Level, and I also like just even a touch more open. You know, so it's kind of level and open, and that really gets the sternum out in front. I clipped that really good. Ball then ground. It didn't get caught at all. You can see it just kind of glided through. There was going to be no leading edge divot there. And that was because of face being slightly open. Left wrist had a little more extension. All of those things gets the club head out of the ground. So managing that point of entry and how the club head gets out of the ground, my goodness, you are ahead of the game with strokes gained around the green. So those are some of the things that I hear a lot that I layer into these programs. Of course, I would love to help you this year. If you want to just train on your own time, let me just watch and learn, but have great context. Go to the website, travisfultongolf.com. Get the bundle. That's all of them. There's more coming, by the way. 150 yards on in is coming in the next 10 days. That's part of the bundle. And then some putting in May as well, which I'm really excited about that. But that gives you the whole context, or just maybe an individual one to help you with that specific need. And then if you really want to get crazy this year, let's do some online lessons, because then we can take it. I can look at the video, give you the full analysis and game plan of exactly what you need to do, referencing the videos with the program. So it's a really efficient way to go about it as well. But nonetheless, this has been a fun pod to kind of go through a lot of the common things that I see. Hopefully you learned something. Appreciate being here. Stripe Show Podcast. Subscribe, like, leave us a comment. We appreciate it. Huge lineup coming next week. It's the Masters, folks. Golf season is here. See you then.